The movie opens in a desert where a woman named Catherine arrives on a horse and soon meets a little boy, Edward. She thanks him for the horse and asks if they can go on a boat today. Edward points to a huge rusty ship buried in sand, but Catherine shows him a small boat they can use. The boy claims it's broken, and moments later, he suddenly transforms into a monster and runs away. Upon seeing this, Catherine presses a sensor on her hand, and the scene quickly shifts to a lab where she's hooked up to a machine. Here, we learn that in this world, special technology allows doctors to enter the minds of patients being treated in experimental labs. Catherine is a psychologist and has been working for some time with Edward, who is in a coma. To help wake him, she regularly enters his mind, trying to gain his trust and free him from the barriers keeping him trapped inside. After the session, Catherine gets out of the costume and exits the lab, where we see her superiors, Dr. Henry and Dr. Miriam. Edward's billionaire parents are funding the technology, but they're now frustrated since the experiment has been running for 18 months without any real success. They think they should just take Edward to a regular hospital, and that Catherine's experiences with his son might only be hallucinations. Elsewhere, we see a man named Carl arriving at an abandoned building in the middle of nowhere with his dog Valentine. Inside, he watches a tank filled with water with a girl floating in it, but soon her body begins to convulse before she finally dies. Meanwhile, Dr. Miriam informs Catherine that Edward's parents have been insisting on stopping the procedure, but they've managed to extend it for another 6 months. Catherine discusses a new treatment for Edward, explaining that she wants to let him into her own mind. However, Dr. Miriam is against this, as it would be dangerous for both of them. However, Catherine insists that the boy now lives in an unhealthy world, and that showing him a different environment is the most effective way to help him recover. Elsewhere, Carl, who turns out to be a serial killer, takes the girl's body and places it in his truck before driving away. Later, at his home, he lays her on a metal table and bleaches her skin completely white, making her look like a doll. He then suspends himself with several hooks pierced through his skin and watches the footage of the girl's final moments in the water. The next day, a woman's body is discovered under a bridge, so an FBI agent named Peter arrives to investigate with his team. A metal collar around her neck reveals she is not the first victim, as 6 other women have already been found dead in the same horrifying manner. Peter is frustrated by another murder, as he has been desperately hunting the sadistic killer for a long time. Elsewhere, Carl is seen stalking his next target, Julia, and carefully plotting the perfect moment to strike. Meanwhile, the FBI team conducts a thorough investigation and soon finds a dog hair on the woman's body. Shockingly, the hair belongs to a German Shepherd with albino, which is extremely rare. Elsewhere, Julia is in a parking lot when she suddenly realizes she has run over something and goes to check. She finds Valentine trapped under the rear wheel and worries she may have hurt him. While comforting the dog, Carl suddenly sneaks up on her from behind and attacks her. Soon, the police learn of Julia's disappearance, putting them in an even more desperate situation. They now actively work to track the albino dog and a truck with tire prints similar to those found near the bridge. Meanwhile, Peter arrives at Julia's house to speak with her family and learns that she was supposed to get married soon and move away. Peter then receives a call from his partner, who reveals that a dog breeder provided information about selling an albino puppy to a strange man, and they have the suspect's address as well. With this information, the police immediately head to the address, and on the way, they review the man's file. His name is Carl Rudolph, and apparently he has no prior criminal record and doesn't even have a gun registration. Elsewhere, Carl is relaxing in his bathtub when he suddenly experiences a seizure and begins to panic. He staggers around the house searching for medicine, but eventually collapses on the floor. Not long after, the police arrive at the house and are shocked to find Carl's unconscious body lying in the kitchen. They search every corner of the home, but Julia is nowhere to be found, although they do find the albino dog. Carl is taken to the hospital, while Peter heads to the basement and discovers several containers of bleach on the shelves. Toys are scattered in strange, twisted poses, and chains hang above a table with the Carver logo. The detective then turns on the TV and is horrified to see footage of the girl's death. Meanwhile, we return to Julia, trapped in the same glass cage and desperately calling for help, but to no avail. Later, Peter meets with a doctor who examines Carl and discovers that he suffers from a severe form of schizophrenia that he contracted in utero and that remains largely dormant until activated by trauma. The doctor explains that he must have suffered trauma from water, but the unfortunate fact is that Carl will never wake up on his own, and no medication can rouse him. However, Peter stresses that a woman is trapped in a room that is about to be completely flooded, and they must save her immediately. Since only Carl knows where she is, they have no choice but to wake him, or else Julia will drown. We then learn that the killer keeps them locked in the cage for 40 hours before releasing the water with an automatic timer, which means the police don't have much time. Upon hearing this, the doctor comes up with an idea and takes Peter to the facility where Catherine and her team work. Peter explains the dire situation to them and asks Catherine to enter Carl's mind to find out where Julia is before it's too late. Realizing the urgency of the situation, the board approves the emergency procedure, and even Edward's parents agree to put his treatment on hold. However, the final decision is left to Catherine, who explains that because schizophrenics cannot distinguish between reality and fantasy, even if the killer is conscious, his perception will be distorted. She says she could gain his trust to make it work, but it would normally take months. However, when Peter stresses the urgency and shows her the video of the previous victims, Catherine reluctantly agrees to help. Next, the team prepares for the procedure, and Catherine explains that Carl held onto chains because he enjoyed the anti-gravity sensation, similar to floating in water. Meanwhile, Dr. Henry explains to the detectives that the machine uses a neurological synaptic transfer system to map one person's brain and send the signal to another. Catherine has a microchip implanted in her arm, which allows her to return to reality by pressing it at any time. Soon after, the session begins, and both Carl and Catherine enter a deep sleep as their neurological systems connect. Catherine soon enters his mind and witnesses a scene of young Carl being baptized in a small lake by several adults. She then finds herself in a dark tunnel where she notices a black dog shaking off blood. Catherine soon sees young Carl climbing a huge ladder to a room and quickly follows him. They arrive in a room with a large horse standing in the middle, while the boy huddles in a corner. Next, Catherine starts talking with little Carl and tries to gain his trust, but he keeps looking at his watch and suddenly pushes the woman away from the horse. All of a sudden, several sharp blades drop down on the horse and mutilate the animal in several places. Catherine realizes that the boy was trying to protect her, but what feels even more bizarre to her is noticing that the horse still seems alive, even though it has been completely sliced up. Following this, little Carl runs away, and Catherine follows him into a room where she is horrified to see cages containing women turned into mechanical dolls. This terrifies her, but suddenly, a huge woman comes out of one of the cages and attacks her. The woman drags Catherine into a hall where a massive man sits on a throne with purple fabrics attached to the hooks on his back. He turns out to be the demonic version of Carl, so he approaches Catherine and asks where she came from. This horrifies the poor woman, so she quickly presses the sensor and returns to reality. Elsewhere, Peter is investigating Julia's disappearance when he is informed that Catherine has returned, prompting him to rush to the lab. Catherine seems extremely terrified and reveals how she has never seen anything like this before. Dr. Henry then advises her to rest, because if her mind believes that what happened in there was real, she could get lost and never return. The scene then returns to Julia, who begins to receive the first jets of water. They come intermittently and spray the room from time to time before the room floods completely and the victim drowns. Elsewhere, Peter finds Catherine near Edward's bed, where she explains the boy's condition to him. She then explains that when she enters someone's mind, she sees everything, even the parts that people try to hide. Catherine no longer wants to feel what she encountered in Carl's brain. She reveals that the man has created a distorted kingdom where he crowns himself as Lord and allows himself to do everything. Upon hearing this, Peter explains that he used to work as a prosecutor, but one day he was forced to let go of a child abuser because of a lack of evidence. The night after the man was released, they discovered him in the living room, with the girl cut open beside him and her heart in the refrigerator. This incident disturbed Peter so much that he quit his job and joined the FBI to catch such maniacs. Catherine then says that there's a positive side to Carl, where he still sees himself as a child. She believes that if she can get through to him, they might find out where Julia is. Following this, Catherine Catherine now gets ready for the second session, but before that, she asks to bring the killer's pet. Valentine also joins them in the room and licks Carl's hand, which may trigger a positive response in him. Soon, Catherine finds herself inside a glass cage, so she rushes around and opens the lid. She flies through some tunnels and ends up in a hall where Valentine meets her. The dog then leads her to a house where a young Carl is washing dishes. She gives him a kind of mirror as a gift and instructs him that when he needs help, he should reflect it with light. The boy enthusiastically accepts it, but Catherine quickly touches a plate, which accidentally breaks. The terrified boy hides her in a closet, just as Carl's father arrives and scolds him for breaking the plate. The man begins physically beating the poor kid, while Catherine stands helplessly, unable to intervene. She also witnesses other instances of abuse Carl endured as a child, which inflicted irreversible trauma on him. In the next scene, Catherine notices an adult Carl by the bathtub in which lies the dead girl's body. He reveals that she's his first victim and asks what Catherine is doing here. She says she wants to help him, but he doesn't believe her and opens up about the first time his schizophrenia was triggered. It turns out it was the day of his baptism, when his father forcefully dipped him. Carl thought he was drowning, but everyone just watched and no one helped him. Then, Catherine directly asks him where Julia is, but he gets mad and refuses to tell her. He then goes into a dark corner, and soon the demonic version of Carl appears and attacks her before putting a metal collar on her. Meanwhile, in the real world, the doctors realize that something has gone terribly wrong and soon discover Catherine is now trapped inside and can't abort the dream. Upon seeing this, Peter offers to enter her mind, and although he doesn't have the necessary training, he has no choice but to take the risk. As Peter prepares to enter Catherine's mind, Miriam advises him that to wake her up, he needs to tell her something personal about her life. Peter soon finds himself in a field where 3 women stand with their mouths open, telling him how their sons had been taken away by their fathers. Just then, young Carl arrives and shines a light at him through the mirror, prompting the detective to follow him. He soon arrives at a room where there's a large bed in the middle, and Catherine is there in a lace dress with a mask on her face. He takes off her mask and tells her that this isn't the real world, but she ignores him and begins kissing him. Just then, the demonic Carl arrives and puts a bag over Peter's head, causing him to pass out. Later, Peter wakes up to find himself tied up, and soon the demonic Carl appears and begins cutting his stomach and removing his intestines, while Catherine watches with a smile. A desperate Peter tells her that this isn't real, and he also reminds her about her little brother, who died in an accident. This finally snaps Catherine back to reality, and she plunges an iron rod into the demon's back. Next, Peter and Catherine find themselves in another room, where in the middle is a cage filled with water, inside of which Julia is floating. Next to them is little Carl, so Catherine asks him to show the place on the map. Meanwhile, Peter observes carefully and notices the Carver logo on the tank, which he had seen in Carl's basement as well. He says that he knows where Julia is and suggests they should leave, but Catherine promises little Carl that they will come back for him and save him right when the demon arrives and takes the kid away. Upon returning to reality, Peter immediately calls his team and asks them to find out everything about the Carver industrial equipment, who used it, who bought it, and who sold it. The FBI immediately leaves the facility, while at the same time, Julia's cage begins to fill with water, and she desperately struggles to stay alive. Meanwhile, Dr. Henry notices that Catherine is preparing to enter Carl's mind once again. He and the other doctors try to stop her, but she has locked herself in the lab. Soon, Catherine finds herself wearing a nun-like outfit and meets little Carl once again. The boy claims that he wants to stay with her, but she tells him it doesn't work like that. All of a sudden, the child transforms into adult Carl and reveals how, once, when he was a kid, he found a bird with a broken leg. His father found out that he had it and would have definitely done something terrible to it, so Carl drowned it himself. Carl implies that he wants her to kill him, but Catherine says she can't do that. Their conversation is then interrupted when, all of a sudden, the demon arrives to attack again. Elsewhere, Peter is informed that the tank was sold to a man who was starting to build a factory, but the man eventually went bankrupt, and when the state acquired the land, they shockingly had hired Carl to seal the property. When they get the location, Peter feels hopeful and heads to the location immediately with his team. Back in the dream world, Catherine begins fighting the demonic Carl and pierces him with arrows. At the same time, Julia has almost drowned, and soon the cops also arrive and check the building, but don't find anything inside. Julia somehow manages to break off a pipe in the ceiling and breathes through it briefly, but it won't last long. Elsewhere, Catherine puts a sword in the demon's chest, but soon notices that the little boy is also injured. However, she realizes that the two personas are inextricably linked and cannot kill one without killing the other. She then approaches the bloodied kid, who begs her to save him and asks her to stay with him. Meanwhile, Peter notices a pipe around the building and follows it to find a hatch that goes down into the basement. There, he eventually sees a cage filled with water, with Julia breathing through a tube. He asks her to swim away and then ends up destroying the glass. This finally lets all the water flood into the basement and ends up saving Julia. Elsewhere, we see a tearful Catherine drowning little Carl and putting an end to his suffering while finally destroying the demon. Back in the real world, Carl experiences a seizure before passing away, which his dog senses and begins whimpering. Catherine also wakes up and breaks down in tears, while Julia is seen sobbing in Peter's arms. The scene then cuts to a few days later, where some detectives are searching Carl's basement, and Catherine also arrives. She wants to see the house, and it is revealed that she has also adopted Valentine. Peter and Catherine chat briefly, and she reveals that she plans to use the reversal technique to bring Edward into her own mind. He worries about her, but she assures him that she'll be fine. Peter then thanks her for everything, after which the two part ways. In the final scene, we see Catherine and Edward in the desert from the beginning of the movie. Now surrounded by blooming trees, she has now earned the boy's trust, and he walks over to embrace her as the movie comes to an end.